Hi, everyone. It's David Ault, and I want to welcome you to The Gathering. If you've followed me, you may be familiar with my spiritual path as a minister of a movement called the Science of Mind, or religious science. The founder of that movement, his name was Ernest Holmes, and he was one of a collective of teachers who make up this thing called the New Thought movement. His major spiritual tome, his writing was called The Science of Mind. And this week I have been doing a series of writings based upon that teaching. So I'm going back to familiar territory. And so I've broken out my big Science of Mind textbook. And I came across a passage I think that you and I can relate to with what's going on right now. He's talking about the cause behind this thing called human troubles. So, troubles in being human, in being in this finite dimensional skin suit that looks at things and sees it through the five senses, realizing that that's a limited experience, and yet it's one of the things that governs and influences our mental state. So, the cause within this framework. He says a change of consciousness does not come by simply willing or wishing, right? So we don't sit on the sidelines, look at the trouble, and wish that the trouble would go away. The trouble is actually calling us to action. He says it's not easy to hold the mental attention to an ideal while the human experience is discordant. We can all agree with that. It's challenging to witness this discord, this discordant nature, this series of events, and to not have it affect us, have it affect our humanity. But it is possible, he says. Knowing the truth, and truth is with a capital T, is not a process of self-hypnosis, but one of a gradual unfoldment of the inner self, that part of us which is the solidity of spirit, the soul of us that has never escaped us, never left us. And so here we are, we're standing in the brink of all of this discordant chaos within our world. We've got a pandemic, we've got a war, we've got our own familial challenges that we're dealing with. We've got our own physicality, our own love life, our own careers, our own creativity. All of these things are bundled up, and we live in a 24-hour news cycle era of living. So it appears as though there's no escape. So I can empathize that it plays upon our mental state, our mental well-being. And so it can feel impossible and overwhelming. And a lot of times the advice that is being given, or the examples that we are looking at and trying to adhere to, are surface examples. They are sort of as he said, self-hypnosis. We're trying to patch things at the level of the effect. And what he is saying is that it's a gradual unfoldment. The peace that is already there is revealed through a gradual unfoldment or a reawakening to the inner self, or that which always knows, or that which is the soul, or that which is the part of God, right? And so what do we do to welcome and to be involved in the gradual unfoldment, the spiritual practice? And it's easy to get tired based upon all of the self-hypnotic, all the patchwork things that we're doing, because we may put all of our eggs into one basket and then get disappointed and then go in this direction and go to this teacher and this book and this lecture and this podcast. And before you know it, we're just in a dizzying array of seeking, and being disappointed, to the point where we just become like a blob and don't do anything. So It's better to pause and to breathe and to look at the discordant nature of everything that's going on in our human world and begin to cultivate a solid practice that welcomes us home. Do you believe that that is possible? Do you believe that that is just spiritual pablum, or do you actually believe in the validity of that kind of interconnection? Well, let me tell you a little bit about some of the ways that we might be able to establish a deepening of that interconnection. So, in my studies and writings this week, I came across a Hindu overlay of some of our primitive nature in human form. It's called the four primitive fountains. So these four primitive qualities that sort of cascade over all of our actions. One is food, one is sleep, one is sex, procreation, and one is self-preservation. So these things, these primitive urges or these drives within us are there. They're a part of the inherent geneticism of being human. There's nothing wrong with them. They serve, right? So think of them as a part of the physical plane, this physical plane of humanity, the part that has to navigate in the density of this particular existence. So those things are built in, just like there are inherent traits within animals. You know, you can watch an animal do all of these kinds of things. The animal didn't go to school to learn how to do those things. It's an inherent trait, an instinct within them. So we have these instincts, right? So those instincts are a part of this human plane. The one to me that has an advantage or a distinction out of those four, food, sleep, sex, self-preservation, is self-preservation. Because self-preservation then also exists in a sort of hybrid plane of the mental state or the mental plane. So the mental plane is what? How do you distinguish the mental plane from the physical plane? The physical plane is just that sort of survival hunter-gatherer instinctual thing. The mental plane is the capacity to think. The mental plane is the development of consciousness. And so we take then this instinctual self-preservation and we move it to the mental plane. And all of a sudden, we have sort of the establishment of or the workings of the ego. Because now self-preservation isn't about hunter-gatherer, protector, but it's more about the ego, self-preserving the ego, self-preserving our identity, our looks, our status, our titles, our wealth, our friendships, our tribal communities, those types of things, traditions. So self-preservation then takes on this whole different nuance. And it is in that arena, the arena of self-preservation from the mental plane, that a majority of our suffering gets heightened. How so? Well, what we begin to see if we sit with this self-preservation long enough is that it introduces a false belief that something can be taken away. It introduces the false belief of separation. I am separate from. So if I'm trying to self-preserve my accumulated goods, my wealth, and there is a recession, and I get all freaked out and panicked about that, what I'm siding with in the self-preservation activity is that some external force can just wipe me out and leave me destitute. So I'm not saying that those things don't happen in the physical plane, that loss doesn't occur in the physical plane, But peace of mind, the gradual unfoldment of the inner self that Ernest Holmes is talking about, does not take place within the physical plane. It takes place within the mental realm. It takes place within the heaven. The physical represents then the hell or the transient. And so what has been our call all along is to bring heaven down to earth or down into the hell realm in order to allow it to diffuse so that only the reality of heaven can be seen. That's a lot, right? So, in other words, it's look at the thing that you're afraid of and go to the fear and let that thing then dissolve by the gradual unfoldment of reacquainting yourself with your inner knowing. And we don't do that. We don't do that a lot because we are stuck in the loop of self-preservation. Self-preservation. The self-preservation is kind of wrapped around this idea of what's going to happen to me. Who's going to take care of me? What's going to happen to my stuff? It's a seduction that pulls us into trying to harness and protect the material, the physical plane. I'm not saying that this is easy, but I'm saying that we are all governed by this particular activity of self-preservation. And it is really the genesis, the primordial beginnings of our suffering. It is the thing that makes the chaos more painful. This is not bypass. This is not about pretending that the chaos isn't real. It's about, are you ready now, as you've begun this gradual unfoldment, to be able to walk into that which is chaotic, to walk into that which is painful, and allow your presence, allow your consciousness to create this alchemical shift so that you don't have to live in fear. One of the big things I think for self-preservation in my personal life has been aging. And I'll tell you a little bit about the journey. So when I stepped down from platform ministry, from running a center, I didn't retire. I stepped down and moved into a different direction of teaching and life experience in running my nonprofit. So I just shifted gears. One of the things that was incredibly insightful about that time period and continues to this day is that I started going to groups, to communities, to retreats, workshops, meditations, where people did not know me. And in those environments, I began to witness the activity of the ego through self-preservation, meaning that they didn't know me. And so the identity of me as David, as a spiritual leader or teacher or minister or whatnot, was not on the table. And I noticed the urge, and the urge comes from self-preservation, to want to raise my hand and to showcase my knowledge. That's ego. Why do that? Why does one do that? Why would I do that? Why would anyone want to sort of make sure that people know who you are? Because our identity governs so much of our mental state. We become so looped and attached to the identity. So, for example, in nursing homes and elder care facilities around the world, how many of these people are lying in bed? These men and these women are lying in beds, being treated and fed and bathed and whatnot by attendants who have no idea who they are. They don't know their story. They don't know that this woman was a piano teacher who taught music to hundreds of children and introduced that amazing world and that amazing gift to them. They don't know that this man might have been a veteran, or this man might have been a textile worker, or this man might have done this thing, or this woman that achieved this thing. They have no idea who they are. They are just tending to a body. And we read about those things and we witness those things because we probably cared for people as well, cared for family members. And when we observe that, something activates that egoic self-preservation within us, and we become concerned about what's going to happen to us. And that concern then is adding to the chaotic fires, because now life is becoming about preserving, preventing, trying to manage. And when we are doing this, we blatantly are moving into a fear of death, the cycle of death. It's not good nor bad, right or wrong. I'm admittedly saying all of these things that I participate as well. So being in those retreats, wanting to see, is sort of a kind of a prevention of, don't forget me. Please know who I am. And so what does one do with that information? What do you do with the activity of this self-preservation? So I didn't raise my hand. I sat there. I sat in the uncomfortableness, and I witnessed what it would feel like to be irrelevant. You see, that's the fear. The fear of becoming irrelevant. And so to sit in that environment and to not try to force relevancy is actually the way through. Not the way around, but the way through the fear, the way through the ego. So the ego says, you better preserve your irrelevancy. And I go, no, I'm not going to. I'm going to practice being irrelevant. I'm not going to try to medicate the feeling. I'm going to sit in the feeling of realizing that no one knows who I am and no one cares. I look like a gray-haired older man, and that's a dime a dozen. I sit with the egoic thoughts that are fighting with me, because the way beyond is the way through. And I know that kind of sounds absurd when we say turn away from the condition, affirm and assume that which you desire to be. And I'm not discounting that. But before I can affirm my value and my worth, I believe that I must face the thing that's clouding that. I can't just patchwork over it. I need to go and I need to sit and practice being irrelevant in order that I can go through that cleanly and claim my worth, and to not let fear fuel me. Because you see, if I don't look at all of the tactics that I have around self-preservation, then all of my actions are based on fear. Again, trying to preserve something. And again, not a right or wrong thing. It's an observation if, as Ernest Holmes is describing, we want to address the discordant nature. We want to uncover the peace, because you see, this is a transient existence. This being human is a limited experience. Anything that I try to do to avoid the natural state of this cycle will produce suffering. And it doesn't mean then that I turn my back against the suffering. It means that I go into the suffering. That you and I are willing to go into the arena or onto the dance floor and to actually partner with our irrelevancy and go, look at you telling me that if I don't do this and I don't effort that and I don't push this and I don't manufacture that, then I won't feel happy. And all of a sudden my happiness is contingent upon my relevancy. And so it's been a beautiful experiment for me since in these last couple of years to look at that, to see I didn't even know how deeply that root of relevancy was there. I didn't know how much that ego thrived upon being the leader. I'm not always going to be the leader. Someday I might be in one of those facilities and someone is wiping me and caring for me and feeding for me, and they have no idea of anything that I've ever done. Can I be okay with that? Can I be at peace with that now, rather than trying to manufacture and hold anyone else responsible for my happiness and my well-being? It's an interesting topic, the four primitive fountains: food, sleep, sex, self-preservation, with self-preservation sort of jumping the arena into the mental state and having all of this nuance. How much of our actions are being run by our need to self-preserve our status, our identity? How much of our actions are built upon self-preserving, getting people to like us? Can I do these videos, these vlogs without, if anyone doesn't watch anymore? Will I be okay with that? Can I do my work in the world to the degree that it feels inspired and not from obligation? These become the bigger lessons. This is really what Ernest Holmes was talking about when he said, knowing the truth is not a process of self-hypnosis, but one of a gradual unfoldment of the inner self. Let me tell you that inner self, that wisdom, it's already there. It's already there. The happiness, it's already there. The genius, it's already there. The wholeness being wholeness in body, mind, spirit, it's already there. You already know. You already are what it is that you're trying to preserve. And so when we allow ourselves the gradual unfoldment, which to me is nothing more than a practice, when we find that practice and we go into the cave unreluctant. I like that phrase. That phrase has been coming up for me a lot in my writing this week. To walk into the cave unreluctant. The cave is the unknown, the mystery, the fear. Can I walk into the fear unreluctant and say, what do you want? What do you want? Rather than crafting a life that avoids the entrance of the cave. Because it is in there that a divine reconciliation with my wholeness occurs. It is in there when I merge back with my soul. It is in the activity of that the everlasting nature of peace can be felt. So I keep getting opportunities to practice my irrelevance. Realizing that they're it's amazing. Aging is amazing. Realizing how much responsibility we place on our dignity into others' hands, and that may not always be there. And can you and I be okay with that? Can we relish the now instead of letting the future taint the quality of this experience on this day? It's a lot. It's a lot of stuff to think about. It's a lot to introduce to you in a short amount of time. But I want you to think about and possibly even sit down and meditate, journal on all of the things that you are aware of that you're doing to try to self-preserve. Is it nothing more than closing the heart? Can you look at all of the activity? Can you even be involved in all of the activity, all of the suffering of the world? Be involved in it. Be the comfort. Be the nourishment. Can you be in it? Can you do? And allow your beingness to not suffer. That is the great quest. That is the practice. So, close your eyes for a second, breathe in and say, whatever this message was that I listened to, got to this point in. I allow the reaping of what is appropriate for me now to be seeded into the soil of my own willingness, so that I can begin to practice walking into my own caves of fear unreluctantly, knowing that by doing so, I am returning home. I'm returning to the essential self that has never abandoned me. And there is a vitality there that longs to partner with me in the moment of the now. I allow it to be so. And so it is. Thank you so much.